Hello, historians, and welcome back. Today, we are talking about the collision of cultures on a massive, grand scale, looking at four different European powers and the sights they set on what they called the New World, so the Americas. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at four different empires. We'll look at Spain, we'll look at France, the Netherlands, also Holland or Dutch. You might see either of those words used. That's the Netherlands, and Great Britain. Now we're going to look at all four of these, which is, these these flags are not historically accurate. These are not the flag, like France didn't have this flag until the French Revolution, but they are what was available on Amazon. So this is basically the four big empires that we're going to look at today, and the different designs they had on the Americas, because it's totally different from kind of the mythology that you've heard about 19th century immigration to America. This is an empire story, not a migration story. And you'll see what I mean as we get through the lecture and today's activity. So I invite you to pull open your notes, get anything you need to keep track. There is a lecture guide and a table that goes along with this activity. So you probably want to access that as well if you haven't already. And as always, I am your hostess, Dr. Summer Sherlin. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Let's get started. All right, colliding cultures. Now we've talked a little bit about native creation and migration stories. So kind of how people arrived in the Americas according to native stories, but also according to anthropology and science, as well as sort of biblical interpretations as to who we are and how we came to be here, right? But so many of the stories you've heard over the years about what brought Europeans to the Americas, what brought people, that's how they tend to just be lumped in with people to the Americas, had to do with this idea of like religious persecution and the desire for new like opportunities for land or for money or wealth or something like that. But we're looking at something very different when we think about that today. We're not looking at that kind of mythology of religious persecution or the mythology of 19th century immigration to the Americas. We'll get there later, okay? So you may have heard that, but what actually brought Europeans to the Americas had nothing to do with individual freedoms. It had to do with imperialism, empire building, right? So one of the things I asked you to link to, if you haven't already, is a lecture guide. So there's several things that we're going to cover in this lecture. If you don't already have this, you might pull that open. And one of the very first things I ask you is true or false. The primary motivator and origin of European colonization to North America was religious persecution. That's false. The primary origin, the primary motivator was empire. It was the national movement, the national race for resources, wealth, and land. And that's why we have these flags. They're reminding us that this isn't about an individual story. This is about a massive movement of empires, four of them to be exact. So European colonization, right? I want you to do a little historical math with me. I'm going to start European colonization in 1513 with the arrival of the Spanish in Florida. Now, we could also do Mesoamerica. So Aztecs in Mexico, for example, this is the arrival of Hernan Cortez, right? You could go back to 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue and he arrived in the Bahamas. But we're going to go with more of a continental history in this particular lecture. So let's say the Spanish arrive in 1513. That's the first European empire to arrive in the Americas and begin colonization efforts, not just showing up and extracting some resources, but maybe settling little colonies throughout the Americas. And then I ended this first period in 1776. Now, any guesses when 1776, what that was? So that was when Great Britain and the United States went to war and America won its independence in the Revolutionary War. So if this is our historical math, Spanish contact from 1513 until the American Revolution in 1776, we now have European control over what is today the United States of America for about 263 years. All right, that period is 263 years long. We are looking at a long span of history in the American story. But wait, you can extend it even further. You could go all the way to 1853 when Mexico lost the US-Mexican War and ceded more than half of Spain's original colonial holdings to the United States as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So 1853. So if we go from 1513 to 1853, that means European colonization lasted for 340 years in American history. Now, that's wild to me. Do you know why? Because America, I'm giving you this lecture in 2024. If America, as we know it, started in 1776, if colonization ended with the American Revolution, let's just go there. If America ended in 1776 and today we're in 2024, that means America, the country, post-colonies, has only been in existence for 248 years. That means the colonization period, the European imperial colonization period in American history is longer than the country itself. Does that blow your mind? Because it blows my mind. To me, that is like, wait, what? Because in classes like these, we spend like a week or two talking about European colonization, and then we move on. We go real quickly to America as this national story. And I just think it's really remarkable. So, as I mentioned, stories you've heard about religious persecution. What brought people to the Americas? The promise of jobs and freedoms. And the reality is, yes, but that's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about imperialism, an entire nation moving forward with a colonization campaign in order to claim land, in order to claim resources, to build the empire, the kingdom, the nation, right? And a competition for resources on a global scale. Now, the only things that may have motivated individuals, and we'll come back to this, is they might have been in like individuals like jumping on ship with Columbus or Cortez. Like, why would they have even agreed to go? It's not about religious persecution. It is a little later, but in the beginning, it's about class. And even when it's about religious persecution, it has a lot to do with class because land in Europe was already claimed by anybody who was royal or noble. There was no land to buy. Today, you can still buy a house. You can still buy a plot of land if you have the money for it. That didn't exist in Europe in the 17th century or the 16th century. The land was already claimed. So you were either a landowner, which meant you were royal or noble, or you were a peasant. So going overseas meant you might have access to something like a little slice of land. And you might go from poor to wealthy because you have access to new resources. It was a huge risk, but it was a belief that it could happen. So like I said, when I talk about these four empires, I'm talking about kingdoms, I'm talking about countries, I'm talking about nations, right? I'm not just talking about like a king or a royal person. I'm talking about the whole project. We've got Spain, we've got France, we've got the Netherlands. You also might see that as Holland or Dutch, and we've got Big Bad Britain. All right, we're going to talk about all four of them today. How did they do it? Spain wants to have world dominance. France wants to have world dominance. Holland wants to have world dominance. Great Britain wants to have world dominance. This is 17th, 16th century superpower. You think about America as a superpower, or Russia as a superpower, North Korea or China, right? These are countries that want world domination. This has existed as long as nation states have existed. People want to be dominant, right? So how did they do it? Well, we're going to look at a couple methods of colonization and what we mean by that in the first place through a couple of categories. Let's look at dates of influence. When was this European empire here in the Americas? When did they get here and how long did their reign last? Where? Areas of influence. Where did they settle? Great Britain, Holland, France, and Spain all settled in different parts of the North American continent. Relationships with Native people. People were here long before these European kingdoms arrived. So how did they manage these relationships? Were they violent? Did they get along? Was there intermarriage? Did they trade with Native people? Like, what did it even mean to be Native and dealing with these Europeans that were living here now? Also, relationships with the home country. Like, once there's a colony here in America that's sponsored by the crown, What's the crown's expectation of these colonists? Also, then, what is the economic and political structure? So this is very different. Each colony is different in its own approach to how the economics are managed and how the politics are managed, because you've got all these people and now you've got to figure out how to manage them. And then what brought the demise? Why aren't we living in the United States of Spain today? Like, why did these colonization efforts end? What was the threat? Why didn't they win out in the end? Those are the questions that you're going to be investigating today. How did they do it? All right, so here's your challenge. You should have access to this table, right? Spain, France, Dutch, no, that's Great Britain, or the Netherlands. Okay, and there's a reason for those being interchanged. It's okay. You've got a Colliding Cultures handout. You've also got a list of literature. So it might look different in different classes, but there are packets of articles that tell you a little bit about the colonization efforts of each of these 4 countries. So you should each be assigned one of these countries to focus on. You might have been assigned to Spain or France or the Netherlands or Great Britain. And what I want you to do is scan this packet only for your country. You only need to look for the country that you were assigned to. And I want you to fill in, let's say that you were assigned to Spain. You only need to fill in these cells according to Spain. All right, so you can go ahead and read those articles, fill in those cells as best you can, and then you're going to get a chance to discuss with others where you're at on that. All right. Now, before you go on, I just want to remind you of a few things. When we talk about imperialism, what imperialism is empire, habits of empire, empire building. What motivates empires is different from what motivates individuals. So what's motivating empires, what's motivating Great Britain to finance these very expensive expeditions into the unknown has really there's 2 motivations. One is access to Asia or the promise of trade. Now, for centuries, Asia, China had been operating the Silk Road, and the Silk Road was the main trading vehicle for anyone really living on the continent. So in Asia or Europe, really. And what European nations wanted was a slice of that control, and they believed they could get it through water. They could get it overseas, a maritime trade. And they didn't know how it would work out, but they thought initially that the Atlantic Ocean ultimately ended on the other side of Asia. They did not realize that they knew there was landmass there. They just didn't know it was a whole new continent that they were unaware of. And so that's why people in America were called Indians immediately, because they believed they'd landed in India or in parts of Asia. The other thing that they're using as a motivation is resources. So once they find the Americas, once they discover this new land, they also find all of these untapped resources that no one in Europe is selling or trading at this time. This is pretty remarkable. So you have things like gold. When the Spanish arrive in Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, they see all of this gold in, stockpiles in the Aztec Empire, and they believe that gold is just like everywhere. Well, of course it wasn't. The Aztecs had, stolen and pillaged other groups to get all that gold. And so they wanted gold, silver, copper, other mining extracts like lime and salt. They wanted to extract lumber, trees. There were huge, giant 100-year-old trees, hundreds of year old trees here in the Americas that could be used for building ships and building homes and building all kinds of bridges and all kinds of things that European nation states wanted. There were new food sources. There were new vegetables and new protein, right? New game that they could hunt. Fur becomes a huge part of the French colonization efforts because the fur that they're able to gather from beaver pelts becomes wildly popular among the nobility for collars and hats or crowns. Think about like 16th century paintings you've seen of French nobility or Spanish nobility. They have fur on their collars, fur on their cuffs. That fur had to come from somewhere, right? And they discovered some in North America. They also wanted to extract people. They believed that they could create enslavement among some of the native people, which they actually were not super successful with. But my very favorite example of a resource to extract is dye. This is so cool. All right. It's the 16th century. It's early 1500s. In Europe, if you wanted color, right? Color on your clothing, color on your, hats or in your hair, any kind of color on your linens, really you only need access to, like, think about it. There's no like synthetic dyes. So you have to have access to things that come from nature. So blues, greens, purple from like different kinds of berries, browns, kind of like a muddy. You know what they didn't have? They didn't have red. They did not have red. And so when the Spanish arrive in Tenochtitlan, they see these Aztecs wearing red. And they're like, where did you get the red? Like, where did you get that red color? Well, do you have any idea where red is from where it's from in the Americas? The original color, the original dye of red is native to the United States Southwest. So the US Southwest, where we are today, at least where I am. Have you ever been in like a yard or a supermarket parking lot and you see prickly pear? You know, prickly pear cactus? Take a look at it next time. If you notice like kind of a soapy, like white residue on any of the paddle cactus petals, you might think it's like mold or bubbles or like decay on the cactus. It's not. Do you know what it is? It is a very specific kind of egg sac that is laid and created by a beetle. And you can't get red dye from the beetle, but you can get red dye from the egg sacs. So the Aztecs would gather just bowls of these sacks of eggs, and they would put them in stone bowls and they would grind it, and it would produce this magnificent shade of red. And the Europeans went nuts for it. Just think about it. Like, you're competing with China. China has silks. They have dyes in turquoise and green and saffron and all of these beautiful colors, but you have dye. You have red. And so Spain becomes largely affiliated, believe it or not, with the color red. It's unique to Spain because of their colonization efforts in the Mesoamericas. All right. Why go? So I'm saying like, oh, this is empire building. Oh, okay, fine. Why would we go as an individual? Why would you jump on board? Would you jump on board because you're patriotic and you want to go on behalf of your country? Would you go because you want the opportunity? Why go? Well, these are some examples. These are just some hints. What motivated individuals to jump on board? And I'm not talking about Columbus. I'm not talking about Isabella, what motivated her to finance this. We're coming back to that in a minute. I'm talking about you and me, peasants, commoners. What would motivate you to get on that boat? Glory. The very first reason, especially in Spain, that people jumped on board was they wanted the opportunities to prove themselves, to make something of themselves, to establish their own empires or claim land, right? Glory. Money. They want access to wealth, and America had all those resources. At least they later found out they did. And religion, not religious persecution, but religious mission work on behalf of the empire, on behalf of Catholicism in Spain, Catholicism in France, Protestantism in Great Britain, and the Dutch are different. So you're motivated by spreading your country's belief system, not by escaping it. That comes later, all right? And then finally, escape. Many of these European countries, you are trapped forever in your state, in your status. You cannot get out of being poor. It's not like now where there's access to higher education and great jobs. It's like you're born to a certain class or a certain caste, and that's where you go. And it wasn't like there weren't schools like we have today. You don't go to school if you're born to the poor class. You might have been required to enter the military. You might have been required at the age of 14 to get married. You have absolutely zero freedoms the way we understand freedom today. So sure, jump on the ship, see what happens. You're able to escape the trappings of middle century Europe by going and taking this huge risk. But we aren't talking about that today, right? We're not talking about individuals. I just want to bring it down. We're talking about empires. So if you were assigned Spain, I want you to read those articles specifically looking for Spain. Where were their areas of influence? When were they there? What were their relationships like with Native people? Home country? What's their economic and political structure? And what are their threats to colonial dominance? Now you do the same for if you're on any of the others. So if you are Great Britain or the Netherlands or France, I want you to just focus on the country to which you were assigned. Fill in your table, and then you should be given further instructions either in Canvas or in class, depending on how you take this class. All right, everybody. I am so excited to see what you come up with. If you have any questions, feel free to text or call, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Bye.